Hello, class, and welcome to our demo on scripting in this week of CIS 112 Linux. So before we get into the scripting demo, I wanted to go over the Docker file exercise. I know a few of you had questions, a lot, not a lot, but a couple of you didn't turn it in as well. It could have definitely been intimidating, right? Taking our Linux skills and putting it into a context we're not familiar with. But if you remember, what the directions said, all you had to do is translate commands 1 through 7. So what is a Docker file, right? What is it doing? It's essentially a script. It's executing a list of commands in order. Now, some of these commands are written specifically for Docker, right? We don't use this run. We don't use this user, these froms, right? So typically, I just kept it to these commands, the run commands, because these are commands that you've ran already in our class. For example, the apt-get update. That's to update the packages, right, and make sure that they're all the most recent versions of those packages. Um, and then apt-get install. That's going to install the following packages: curl, vim, and sudo. These are all commands that we've learned. What's the difference, right? Well, all these commands were strung together, right? There's a few things outside of these commands. And I know it can be intimidating, right? Seeing things that aren't familiar. But that's probably what's going to happen, right? In a real job. You're going to have some basic skills. They're going to ask you to apply those skills in a context that maybe you're unfamiliar with, right? But you take what you know and you build off of that. So maybe you don't know everything that's going on in this Docker file, but you know chmod, you know make directory, you know change directory, user mod. These are all commands that are familiar to us, and those are the ones I had you translate, right? So this exercise, more than just translating, right? Some basic file navigation, right? Touch, cd, make directory, permissions with chmod, user mod, that's user management, add users, also use user management. This is package management. All the different weeks we've covered. Um, Rather than getting intimidated, right, just go off what you know and then build off of that. I will tell you firsthand, when I first got my job, I knew very little Linux. I knew enough to get around like the file system, but I actually got really good at Linux through development, through making mistakes, through doing things the wrong way, and then of course, right, the guidance of some of my other peers, right, some of my more senior developers would give me tips. But yeah, I remember looking at my first Docker file. I had to write my first Docker file, and I didn't really know what was going on, right? But I kind of built off what I know. I'm like, okay, I think this is supposed to do that. You do some Google searching, right, to figure out. But for this assignment, commands 1 through 7, just what we covered in class, no outside knowledge required. So don't let, right, the context scare you. I know with code, right, with command line, it's very, very intimidating, right? There's no icons, there's no pictures, right, to guide us along the way. There's no tooltips, right? When you hover over something, it tells you, oh, this is what it does, right? For example, if I hover over font, it tells me font. We don't get those guidelines, right, in command line. We're expected to know more. Um, so it's okay to make mistakes, right? That's natural in command line. It's okay, right, when you're thrown in the deep end, right, like in an assignment like this, to not know everything that's going on. But again, just go off of what you know. All right. So that being said, this Docker file exercise was actually a preview to scripting because this Docker file is a script. It's a sequence of commands that if you want to run them all you need to do is run one command. The command to execute the script is actually called Docker build. We're not going to learn that, right? Docker, though, extremely industry standard tool used everywhere in all sorts of different roles, whether you're data science, whether you're IT. Docker is going to be definitely something you're going to encounter and maybe something you'll use on a daily basis. So while I'm not expecting you to become a Docker expert in this class, right? At least now you can say you've had some exposure. What is Dockerfile? What is Docker? Well, we have the definition here, right? What is a Docker file? It's essentially a script um, for packaging and application. So yeah, you're running all these commands to put all these files together, and now you can run this application. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a step back. and let's bring it back to something more simple, right? We're going to create a very basic script. Before we do that, we're going to run some commands. So let's see. I'm going to make a directory. I'm going to call it, let's see. Before I make my directory, I want to introduce a new concept. I know it's not covered in the slides. This is really a preview. So what we're going to be covering in the final weeks of scripting is variables. So we've already actually done this before, but echo user. I'm using a different VM today, so it's not your typical VBox user, right? But if you do echo and then you do $user, $sign is kind of like the universal prefix to a variable in Linux. So user is a variable that's already automatically set by the system. It's set to the current user. So the current user is Labex. So if I do echo $user again, remember echo is just to print something out to the command console. So yeah, echo user is going to echo the current name. So there you go. It's going to echo Labex. So that's why I printed out this Labex. If I do echo hello world, and notice I had to use the quotation marks because in computing, it's pretty universal that if you're going to tell the computer to read a sequence of words, a sequence of letters, you got to use your quotes. Otherwise, it might think it's like a command. So yeah, echo hello world, and then print it out hello world. Now, of course, when I said echo $user, it didn't print out $user. It printed out a variable of an actual value. So $user is pointing to my name, to my username, which is Labex. We're actually going to learn how to set our own variables once we get the hang of basic scripting. So let's go ahead and make a directory. So I'm going to make a directory with, actually not with my username, on go make directory, let's say scripts. I do my ls and then I can see my scripts directory there. All right, so let's go ahead and navigate to my scripts directory. You can see that it's empty. We're gonna create a file and we're gonna use that variable to create the file name. So I'm gonna say touch. Now, when you're introducing a variable into the file name, you're going to want to use your quotes. So you're going to use $sign. And on top of the quotes, you do have to use user here. So it looks a little bit different, right? We're going to get really familiar with these different formats. But if you're going to use the username in an argument like touch or nano or echo, if you're going to combine it with other words, you got to use your quotes. And then you got to use these curly braces. We call this, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what the word is. One sec. But yeah, so it's string interpolation. That's when you combine variables with other values, for example, with other words. So if I'm going to combine my user variable here, I have to actually use these curly braces and the $sign. So it's a little bit strange. We'll go over more of these formats over the next weeks. But for the lab, you will need to do this, right? Because you're going to create a directory using the current user's name. So I already echoed the user, but if I'm going to use it in the file name, I'm going to do echo, so user, and then let's do first script.sh. To ls, and then you can see that as part of the name of the file, it did take in my username variable, which is pointing to Labex. We call this a reference often in programming. Hashtag, or sorry, not hashtag, $sign user is pointing to Labex value. All right, so this script is empty. So even if I chmod it, nothing interesting is going to happen. So let's do, I tabbed into that, by the way. And then let's see, let's run the script as we covered in the slides. You just do /. Nothing really happened. That's because there's nothing in the file, right? I could do cat And yeah, nothing prints out because there's nothing in it. So let's do a nano. And we're going to change the contents of the script. So let's go ahead and change the contents. Well, if it's going to be a script, right? I'm going to need my interpreter. I'm going to need to let it know which interpreter to use. So let's go ahead and start with that. So I always forget the order of the characters, right? Typically I just copy paste it from another script. Yeah, it's okay to forget. Um, we're not like computers, right? Where we remember every single command. These things kind of stick after doing it over and over again. So if you have a role where you're using a lot of Linux, this, I promise you, will become second nature to you. But currently, you're a student, you're juggling a lot of classes. Don't feel bad, right? If you don't have the entire command history that we've covered memorized in your head. Feel free to make little sticky notes. Something I like to do, just to show you. If you're on Windows, this might look different on Mac, but this is a cool app. You can always create little post-it notes on your computer. You can put commands there, little tips for your assignments. But yeah, I added the bin bash right to the top of my script. So I tell the shell, hey, no matter what, the code that I'm going to give you is going to be a bash script code. So let's go ahead and do the same command that we did in creating a file. So we're going to do touch. And actually, we're going to echo the username. And then we're going to create a file with that username. So we're going to do touch. And then we're going to do hashtag. Oh, if we're going to do combine this, we got to do quotes, $sign, not hashtag. I keep saying hashtag. And then we're going to go user. And then I'm going to give it a file name. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to say my first script again, right? Because I'm currently in the first script. So I'm going to say a new file. Let's say, throw an S in there. Whoops. New file. .txt. And there you go. See how it changes color. We talked about in the slides, right? There's different types of shells. Some shells you can actually customize to do some formatting on the color. So it'll do different colors for variables, different colors for strings. So that's something available in the ZSH shell or the Z shell. You could also do it on Bash. It just takes some configuration. All right, so echo user, we're going to create a new file, and then we're going to run the ls command just to confirm, right, what we've done, what we've created. Once you're ready to save the file, you do Control O, and then once you're ready to leave the file, you do Control X. All right, so I'm going to ls. So I have my first script here. I already chmoded it, so I don't have to worry about my permissions. Let's go ahead and run it again and see what happens. And check it out. It printed out my username. If we go back into the file, right? If I do cat Labex first script, check it out. So cat, right? I'm going to see inside the script. Yeah, did it echo my username? It sure did after I ran it. Did it create a file called Labex's new file .txt? It absolutely did. And then if confirm, right, I need to run the ls to list all the files in the directory. And yeah, it listed my script, which is in this directory, and the new file. So yeah, there you go. That's scripting. It's kind of a blank slate, right? What you want to use scripting for. I currently am a front-end developer, so I deal a lot with servers. When I need to like post a lot of data to a server, to an API, I could do it one line at a time, right? I could copy paste all this data. I could do it, one item at a time. When I say data and I say API, think of it as every time you post something on social media, right? You're sending data across the internet. Well, I do the same thing in my engineering role. I post data to a server. Once we get to more advanced scripting, we'll obviously look at some actual server examples. I'm thinking of creating a server for you guys that you can actually script some HTTP commands to. I know it sounds scary. I'm still kind of designing the assignment, so we'll see. But yeah, in order to post data, it's very painstakingly slow if I do it one at a time. If I create a script, because I was posting this data over and over again, this test data, then the script would do like 100 different, um, 100 different sets of data and post them all in one click. Very, very cool. So all of your assignments, pretty much every single one from backup, back to the one where we just created some directories, right? Just like we created files here in this example, you could turn all those commands into a script. So each of your assignments can be one script. Of course, scripts do have some limitations, right? There are some things we have to do, um, like there's some physical things that you have to do, right? Like when we introduce an extra disk to the system, right? In real life, you actually have to provide the hardware to do that, right? So obviously scripting can't do what humans do, right? But when it comes to running commands, scripting pretty much the sky's the limit. Things I've run into in the past when it came to scripting, issues I'd run into in my job with scripting would be setting the right permissions, right? Not having the right permissions, and one of the commands in the script failing. So when you have a really strong core, right, of permissions, of file navigation, um, and then you can supplement that, right, through other resources, right? I use ChatGPT all the time. I thought, hey, how can I script, X, Y, and Z? And then it gives me the code. I wouldn't have been able, I could have certainly learned, right, every step of the way, taken a few hours to get the fundamentals, but it gives me exactly what I need. I put in that code into a script. I run it a bunch of times, and if I need to make changes, then I get familiar with the command. Again, really, when it comes to Linux, it's all about learning by doing. But anyways, this is pretty much all you need for the task this week. It's very simple. Uh, you're gonna make um, you're gonna make a directory through the script, and you're gonna generate some files as well through the script. Let's actually go ahead and review that.